Looking back, I should have noticed the signs earlier. But when you've spent 50 years trusting someone, when you've raised them from a helpless infant to a grown man, it's hard to imagine they could look you in the eye while stealing your future. Today, I want to share with you something that cost me nearly everything. Not just my savings, but something far more precious. Maybe my story will help someone else see what I was too blind to recognize. My name is Margaret Sullivan, though everyone's always called me Maggie. I'm 75 years old now, a retired elementary school teacher who spent 32 years shaping young minds at Jefferson Elementary School. I have silver white hair that curls naturally, stopped fighting it years ago, and blue eyes that my late husband Thomas used to say reminded him of a calm summer sky. These days, those eyes have seen more storms than I ever imagined. I'm sitting here at my kitchen table in my small apartment, watching the maple trees outside my window turn brilliant shades of orange and red. It's autumn 2023, and there's a cup of tea beside me that went cold an hour ago. I haven't touched it. Instead, I've been staring at these bank statements spread across the table, trying to understand how I let things get so far before I finally open my eyes. Let me take you back to where this really begins. 3 years before everything fell apart. Thomas died in the winter of 2018. We'd been married for 47 years. 47 years of Sunday morning pancakes, of grading papers together at this very table, of quiet companionship that didn't need many words. He had a heart attack while shoveling snow from our driveway. Our neighbor found him. I was inside making hot chocolate, waiting for him to come in and warm up. The grief was suffocating. For weeks, I couldn't breathe properly. Everything in our little house reminded me of him, his reading glasses on the nightstand, his favorite coffee mug, the crossword puzzles he'd left half finished. Our son David came to the funeral, of course. He was 42 then, never married, working as a car salesman at a dealership across town. He'd always been a bit of a drifter, never quite settling into anything, but he was my son, my only child. After the funeral, after the casseroles from neighbors stopped coming, after everyone went back to their normal lives, David started visiting more regularly. Every Sunday afternoon, he'd show up with takeout Chinese food or pizza. We'd eat together, and he'd ask how I was managing. For the first time in years, I felt like I had my son back. The distance that had grown between us over the years, his failed business ventures, his borrowing money he never quite repaid, the girlfriends who came and went, all of that seemed to fade. He was here now, when I needed him most. "Mom, you shouldn't have to worry about all this paperwork," he said one Sunday in early 2019, gesturing at the pile of bills and bank statements on the table. "Let me help." "I know Dad used to handle all the finances. That's too much stress for you right now." I was grateful. Thomas had always managed our money, and truthfully, I felt overwhelmed by it all. There were insurance forms, Social Security documents, the pension paperwork from my years of teaching. It all blurred together in my grief. "Are you sure, honey? I don't want to be a burden." David smiled, that boyish grin that reminded me so much of when he was 7 years old, showing me a crayon drawing he'd made. "You're not a burden, Mom. You're my mother. Let me take care of you for once." So I agreed. We went to the bank together, and I gave him power of attorney. Limited, he said, just enough to help pay my bills and manage my accounts. The bank officer, a young woman with kind eyes, asked if I was sure. I remember feeling slightly annoyed by her question. Of course I was sure. This was my son. My monthly income was $1,800 from my teacher's pension and Social Security combined. It wasn't much, but Thomas had paid off our mortgage before he died, and I lived simply. I figured I had enough to get by, maybe even save a little for emergencies. David established a routine. First Monday of every month, he'd come over, we'd have lunch, and he'd take care of the bills. He'd sit right here at this table with my checkbook and bank statements, and he'd write out checks for utilities, for my small car payment, for everything. He'd show me the totals, explain what went where. It all seemed fine. "You're left with about $800 after everything's paid," he'd tell me. "That should be plenty for groceries and whatever else you need." And it was, for a while. I lived modestly, always had. A roast chicken could last me 3 days. I shopped at discount stores, used coupons religiously, grew tomatoes and herbs in pots on my tiny balcony. I'd been a teacher. I knew how to stretch $1. But sometime in late 2020, I started noticing things felt tighter. The pandemic had changed everything. I couldn't see my friends as often. David's visits became shorter. He'd drop by, handle the bills quickly, and leave. He seemed distracted, always checking his phone. When I asked how he was doing, he'd brush me off with, "Fine, Mom, just busy with work." By the spring of 2021, I was struggling to make my grocery money last the month. I started buying less meat, more beans and rice. I told myself it was healthier anyway. When my reading glasses broke and I needed new ones, I bought a cheap pair from the drugstore instead of going to the optometrist. They gave me headaches, but they worked well enough. That summer, my car started making a terrible grinding noise. The mechanic said I needed new brakes, $400. I didn't have it. For the first time since David had been helping me, I asked him for money. "Mom, you should have that in your account," he said, frowning. "Didn't you save anything?" I felt embarrassed, like I'd failed somehow. "I thought I had, but..." He sighed, that exasperated sound that made me feel like a foolish old woman. "I'll take care of it this time, but you need to budget better." He paid for the brakes, and I felt guilty for weeks afterward. The following winter, December 2021, Chicago had one of its brutal cold snaps. Temperatures dropped below 0 for days. My winter coat was 15 years old, the lining torn, stuffing coming out. I needed a new one desperately. I'd seen a nice one on sale at Macy's for $120. Not expensive, but warm and well-made, the kind that would last. I went to the ATM to withdraw money. Declined. Insufficient funds. That couldn't be right. I tried again. Same message. My hands shaking, from cold or fear, I'm not sure which. I went inside the bank. The teller checked my account. "Mrs. Sullivan, you have $47 in your checking account." "That's impossible," I said. "My pension was deposited last week. There should be over $800. She pulled up my account history on her screen, then turned it so I could see. My pension had been deposited, yes, but 2 days later there was a transfer. $900 to an account I didn't recognize. "Did you authorize this transfer?" she asked gently. I stared at the screen. $900. Every month, going back. I scrolled up. 2 years, 24 months of $900 transfers. "I need to see my full account history," I whispered. "Everything, going back to 2019. What I discovered sitting in that bank, printed out on page after page of statements, destroyed me. Starting 6 months after Thomas died, there had been monthly transfers of $900 to an external account. In the beginning, David had shown me bills totaling about $900. Utilities, car payment, insurance, everything. But most of those bills were only around $400 total. He'd been pocketing the difference, nearly half my monthly income, for 2 years. But it was worse than that. The young banker, the same one who'd asked if I was sure about the power of attorney, called over a manager. Together they found something else. 2 credit cards in my name that I'd never applied for. David had used the power of attorney to open them. Both were maxed out. Total debt, $15,000. The charges were to online gambling sites, sports betting, casino games, cash advances. I sat in that bank for 2 hours while they documented everything. The manager suggested I file a police report. I couldn't speak. I just kept thinking about Sunday afternoons, about Chinese takeout, about my son sitting at my kitchen table, smiling at me while he wrote out fake numbers on fake explanations of where my money was going. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. Instead, I drove to David's apartment. I'd only been there a handful of times. A rundown building in a sketchy neighborhood. I always wondered why he lived there when he claimed his car sales job paid well. He answered the door in sweatpants, looking startled to see me. "Mom, what are you doing here? Is everything okay?" I pushed past him into the apartment. It was a mess. Pizza boxes, beer cans, a laptop open on the coffee table showing a sports betting website. "You've been stealing from me," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat. Dead. His face went through several expressions. Surprise, panic, calculation. Then he went with defensive. "Stealing? Mom, I've been helping you. Do you know how much time I spend managing your accounts? You've been taking $900 every month for 2 years. I needed it. I was going to pay you back. I just had some bad luck, but I'm about to hit it big. There's this system I've been working on. You opened credit cards in my name. That stopped him. He sat down heavily on his couch, put his head in his hands. It was supposed to be temporary, just to cover some debts until I got ahead. Mom, I'm in trouble. I owe people money. Bad people. I stood there looking at my son, this middle-aged man with thinning hair and broken dreams, and I felt nothing. The numbness was a mercy, I think. If I'd felt everything right then, it might have killed me. I trusted you, I said quietly. After your father died, when I had nothing else, I had you. I thought I had you. You do. Mom, I'm sorry. I'll fix this. I promise. Just don't. He looked panicked. Don't call the police. Please, I'll go to jail. You should go to jail. You stole from your own mother. I'll pay it back. Every penny. Just give me time. I wanted to believe him. God help me. Even then, some part of me wanted to believe my son could be redeemed. That this was just a terrible mistake, that the boy I'd raised was still in there somewhere. But I'd been a teacher for over 3 decades. I'd seen hundreds of children grow up. I knew the difference between someone who made a mistake and someone who made a choice. David had made choices. Every month for 2 years, he'd looked me in the eye, eaten my food, accepted my gratitude, and stolen from me. I'm going to the police, I said. He begged, he cried, he got angry, yelling that I'd always been too controlling, that Dad had left him nothing, that I owed him for all the years he'd visited me out of obligation. I listened to it all, and then I left. Filing the police report was humiliating. I had to explain how I'd been so stupid, so trusting. The detective was kind but blunt. Because I'd given David power of attorney, it was complicated. He'd technically had legal access to my accounts. The credit cards were more clear-cut fraud, but even that would be hard to prove if he claimed I'd known about them. The reality, Mrs. Sullivan, is that these cases rarely result in jail time, especially for family members. You might get restitution ordered, but actually collecting it is another matter. The legal process took 8 months. In that time, I had to hire a lawyer I couldn't afford, revoke the power of attorney, close all my old accounts and open new ones, report the credit cards as fraudulent. David was eventually charged with financial exploitation of an elderly person and credit card fraud. He took a plea deal, 3 years probation, restitution of $21,600, the stolen pension payments, plus the $15,000 credit card debt, payment plan of $200 a month. Do you want to know how much I've received? 0, not 1 penny. After 6 months of missed payments, his probation officer said they could violate him, send him to jail. I told them not to bother. What good would that do? He'd still be broke when he got out, and I'd still have nothing. The credit card companies forgave most of the debt after I proved fraud. Thank God for small mercies. But the pension money was gone. $21,600 that I'd never see again. I couldn't afford to stay in the little house Thomas and I had bought in 1976. Even without a mortgage, the property taxes and utilities were too much on half my pension. I sold it in 2022. The neighborhood had gone downhill over the years. I got $180,000 for a house that had been our entire world. After paying off the remaining credit card debt, the lawyer and other expenses, I had about $150,000 left. I put it in a trust that even I can't touch, except in true emergencies. I learned my lesson about access. It generates maybe $400 a month in interest. Now I live here in subsidized senior housing. It's not terrible, clean, safe, 1 bedroom with this little kitchen. My rent is based on my income, about $600 a month. That leaves me roughly $1,200 for everything else, plus the trust interest. I qualify for food assistance, which helps. I don't see David. He's called a few times, usually drunk, either apologizing or blaming me. I don't answer anymore. Changed my number 6 months ago. I heard through a distant cousin that he's still working at the same dealership, still gambling, still losing. You want to know the hardest part? It's not the money. I mean, yes, it's hard eating pasta 3 nights a week, shopping at thrift stores, making my medication last by skipping doses sometimes. But I survived the depression as a child, rationing during the war, lean years as a young teacher. Poverty I can handle. The hardest part is the loneliness. Thomas is gone. David is dead to me, or I'm dead to him. I'm not sure which. We had no other children. I was an only child. My parents passed decades ago. Most of my teaching colleagues are either dead or in nursing homes. The friends I had from church drifted away after I moved to this neighborhood. I sit here most evenings watching the sun set through these windows, and I wonder what it was all for. 50 years of marriage, raising a child, teaching hundreds of students, trying to be a good person, and this is where I ended up. Alone, broke, betrayed by the one person I thought would be there at the end. But I'll tell you something. Something I've learned sitting in this small apartment with my cold tea and my thrift store cardigan. I have my dignity. Nobody can take that unless I give it to them. I could have stayed silent, pretended everything was fine, let David keep stealing until there was nothing left. I could have made excuses for him, blamed myself, carried his shame. A lot of mothers do. I've met them at the senior center, women who won't report their children, who enable them until they die in debt and despair. I chose differently. It cost me my son, but I kept my self-respect. I sleep at night. I know I did the right thing, even though it hurt worse than anything I've ever experienced. Even losing Thomas wasn't this painful because that was death, natural and unavoidable. This was betrayal, and I had to choose to confront it. If you're listening to this and you see yourself in my story, if you're letting someone take advantage of you because they're family, because you love them, because you're afraid of being alone, I want you to hear this clearly. You are worth more than someone's bad choices. Your security, your future, your peace of mind, they matter. Love doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean sacrificing yourself on the altar of someone else's dysfunction. Setting boundaries, protecting yourself, even turning someone in when they've committed a crime against you, that's not cruelty, that's survival. And if they truly loved you, they would never have put you in that position to begin with. I lost my son, but the truth is I'd already lost him years before. I just didn't want to see it. The gambling, the failed schemes, the borrowing money, the distance, those were all signs. I ignored them because I wanted to believe in a version of David that maybe never existed, or at least hadn't existed for a long time. Grief is strange. I grieved more for David than I did for Thomas, in a way. When Thomas died, I could remember the good times purely. I could cherish our memories without them being poisoned, but with David, every memory is now tainted. Was he genuine when he visited me in the hospital when I had pneumonia in 2015? Or was he already thinking about how he could use me? When he hugged me at his father's funeral, was he comforting me or calculating? I'll never know. And that's a different kind of loss. Not just losing a person, but losing your history with them. I'm 75 years old. I probably have another 10, maybe 15 years if I'm lucky. I won't spend them bitter. I've met some nice people here in the building. There's a woman named Louise who plays cards every Thursday evening. We don't talk about our children. There's an unspoken understanding among us who live here. We all have stories, most of them sad. We focus on the small joys instead. A good book, a sunny day, a meal that turned out particularly well. Last week, I volunteered to tutor at the elementary school down the street. Just a few hours a week helping kids with reading. I can't afford to do it for free anymore. They're paying me $15 an hour. But it's not about the money. It's about remembering who I was before all this. I was a teacher. I was good at it. I loved it. A little boy named Marcus reminds me why I went into teaching in the first place. He struggles with dyslexia, gets frustrated easily. Last Tuesday, he read an entire page without stopping, and his face just lit up. That pure, unguarded joy, that's real. That matters. David's betrayal doesn't erase the good I did in my life. It doesn't erase the students I helped, the marriage I built with Thomas, the person I am. It's a chapter in my story, a painful one, but it's not the whole story. So here's what I want you to take from this, if you take anything at all. First, protect yourself. I don't care who it is, your child, your parent, your spouse, your best friend. Protect your financial future. Never give anyone complete access to your money. Have separate accounts, check your statements, stay informed. Trust, yes, but verify. Always verify. Second, don't ignore the signs. I knew David had problems. I knew he struggled with impulse control, with money, with responsibility. I made excuses because he was my son. Don't do that. See people for who they are, not who you want them to be. Third, it's never too late to set boundaries. I was 73 when I reported David. I thought I was too old to start over, too tired to fight, but I did it anyway, and I'm still here. Bruised, broke, but still here. And that counts for something. Finally remember that stuff is just stuff. Money is just money. I would have rather kept my pension and my house and my comfortable life, but losing those things didn't kill me. What would have killed me, what would have destroyed the person I am, was living a lie, pretending everything was fine, letting myself be a victim without fighting back. I look at these bank statements sometimes, the evidence of my son's theft, and I don't feel angry anymore. Mostly I feel sad. Sad for the relationship we could have had, sad for the man he could have been, sad for the grandmother I'll never be, because David never had children, and now I'll never see him again to know if he ever does. But I also feel something else, something I didn't expect. I feel proud. I'm proud that when the time came, when I discovered the truth, I didn't shrink from it. I didn't make myself small. I didn't accept the unacceptable. I stood up even though I was scared, even though I was alone, even though it meant losing my only child. That old bank officer who asked if I was sure about giving David power of attorney, I saw her a few months ago. She recognized me, asked how I was doing. I told her the truth, the whole story. She looked stricken. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I had a feeling something wasn't right, but I couldn't refuse to process it if you consented." "You asked," I told her. "You tried to warn me." "I didn't listen. That's not on you." "How are you managing now?" she asked. I thought about it. How am I managing? I live in a small apartment. I eat simple food. I tutor children for gas money. I haven't bought new clothes in 2 years. I'm alone, but I'm also free. Free from lies, free from being used, free from the exhausting work of making excuses for someone else's choices. "I'm managing just fine," I told her, and I meant it. The maple trees outside my window are almost bare now. Soon it'll be winter again. I have a warm coat this year. Found a beautiful one at the thrift store for $12, barely worn. I have heat, food, a roof over my head. I have my Tuesday and Thursday mornings with the kids at school. I have my dignity. That's enough. That has to be enough. And most days it is. If my story helps one person protect themselves, stand up for themselves, choose dignity over denial, then maybe this whole nightmare had a purpose. Maybe David's betrayal, as much as it destroyed me, also freed me to become someone stronger than I was. I don't know if I'll ever hear from my son again. Part of me hopes I will. Hopes he'll get help, get clean, become the man I always believed he could be. But I'm not waiting for it. I'm not building my life around that hope. I learned that lesson too well. I'm building my life around what I have, not what I lost. Around what's real, not what I wish were true. And you know what? That's not such a bad way to spend your last years. Living in reality, even when reality is hard, is better than living in a beautiful lie. I tell myself that every morning when I wake up in this small apartment. I tell myself that when I eat my simple dinner alone at this table. I tell myself that when I lie down at night and remember Sunday afternoons that were never what I thought they were. I tell myself, "You did the right thing, Maggie. You're going to be okay." And some days I even believe it.